But Sebastian's here, come on. How we doing? Okay. And last panel of the day, or I guess only panel of the day, last part of Playgrounds, Day 1 Berlin. Pretty awesome. Huge props to Leon over there and the whole Playgrounds team. Can we give them a round of applause? They have worked so hard to put this thing together. It is unbelievable watching them, and it's such a privilege for us, as I know I can probably speak for everyone, to be here with Leon and the team, and also with you guys. And thank you for taking the time. I'm sure you are a little bit tired here at the end of the day. Thank you for taking the time to come here and hang out with us. This is the Firestarter panel. Everyone know what Firestarter is? Okay. Firestarter is the magazine of this community. It is the hub on paper for how this community works, and that is off the hard work and off the back of Mr. Spiridan. Please give it up for Spiri. One of the in the festival circuit and in this community, one of the hardest working guys I know. You can see him literally all over the world. Doing Firestarter and bringing things out here for you guys, because he wants to help, and he wants to inform, and he wants to make life a little bit better for everyone. So please, if you haven't met him before the end of this, go up and give him a high five. He works really hard to make all of our lives a little bit better, and I could not be prouder to call him myself his friend. So without further ado, we are going to be talking about Maximilian, what's the official name of this?
Work-life balance.
Work-life balance. That's what this panel is. And we've got a really awesome group of panelists here. All the way down is Max Berman. Max is a matte painter and art director. He's worked on Halo and Far Cry and Destiny. He is also my partner at Kitbash 3D. Anyone in here heard of Kitbash 3D? Sweet. All right. Welcome. Yeah. And next to Max is Paulien. Paulien is an amazing illustrator from Germany, yes? And we're here. We did this panel in the Netherlands last week together, and delighted to see you again. And next to Paulien is Evan. Evan worked with Blizzard, concept artist, very, very well known in the world building community. I'm sure you all know that. And next to them is Mr. Staup.
Every time.
Damn it. I thought I had it. I had it. Eric is an incredible designer. He's worked with H.R. Giger. He's done all sorts of really cool projects. I'm sure you've seen some of his work out there and all over screens all over the world. So we're incredibly pumped to get to spend time with you. Next to Mr. Staup is Georgie Holt. And Georgie is the social media manager of Procreate. Anyone work with Procreate? That's what I'm talking about. Look at that. Procreate is an unbelievable resource, an amazing iPad app, the #1 iPad app. So if you haven't checked out their booth, go hang out with them and hit Georgie up on their Procreate social media. And next here we have. I know. I was
Trevor.
trying.
The one and only Trevor.
The one and only Trevor. Trevor is a concept artist. You know, all the cool stuff, Riot, CCP. And we're going to dive in. Yeah? Did I do all right? No, you did perfect. Oh, jeez.
Well, and okay. one more. Hosting this is Mr. Banks Boutté.
Oh, yeah, right.
Co-founder of Kitbash 3D and Fuzzy. And also extremely charismatic person who should host just about everything in this.
It's not an introduction.
I don't know. That's my personal beliefs. I'm a little biased.
Thank you all. Pleasure to. I feel like it's all right. So let's jump into this. We're talking about work-life balance, right, Max? Let's start with you, Max. I know that structure and order versus chaos is something that's been really important to you in your whole working career. I know that spending a lot of time figuring out how do you manage your personal life so that your work can really shine, you do in such a disciplined way. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The creative process is such a chaotic process in and of itself. And, for me, I've always had this philosophy that the more order I can bring to everything else in my life, the more chaos I can handle in the creative process. And so, I treat art as if it is, I love this quote Ash says of, I'm an Olympic athlete and art is my sport. And it's that idea of structuring everything in your life to allow you to perform at your absolute peak as an artist every day. And that means really simplifying everything else and making sure that you have the discipline to be able to create the best work that you can create, and in a sustainable way where you can do this for a lifelong career. If you're burning the midnight oil all the time and you're working weekends nonstop, you're gonna burn out. And the recovery time of burnout is a lot worse than finding a steady pace for yourself. And so for me, I've always looked at discipline, schedule, creating order as necessary to be the best artist possible.
Sweet. I think it couldn't be more important to try to structure your life. Georgie, you work in in a different space than most of the other panelists. You work for a company that in your job, you're all over the world. You're managing an incredible travel schedule. How is it that you manage taking care of yourself along the way, and how do you put focus into that?
So it's, first of all, pretty tricky being in Australia because our time zone is not the same as everywhere else. So I quite often find myself working outside of regular work hours, on the weekend, really late into the night sometimes, just answering stuff that comes through on social media that, if I leave it until the next morning, people are having to wait for like 12 hours or something till they get a response. Unfortunately, sometimes unavoidable, but Australia. Yeah, so, it can be really tricky for me personally to find that balance because my work hours are really, really irregular, essentially. So I try really hard to put, especially on weekends, to put a focus on, okay, I'm not going to touch Procreate's Instagram account today. It's blowing up, but I'm going to leave that until Monday, and then I'm just going to hate myself on Monday, and it's fine. But
well, speaking of that, on social media, there's so much talk about screen time and taking time away from that. Being that so much of your job is in front of a screen, literally on social media, do you put specific time blocks and regulations for? No, you just go.
Because of the time zones, again. I would hate to look at my screen time. I just really would hate to look at that on Apple's new system. My phone doesn't last a whole workday with battery life. I have to charge it. It's really, really hard. And my partner, I think, also finds it a little bit hard that I work so constantly. So I do have to put a real focus, as I said, especially on weekends, and trying to block out time for myself and for him, and also for my dogs, because anyone who knows me knows I love my dogs. And I can see probably some of my workmates up the back there just being like, oh my God, she's talking about her dogs again. Here we go about her dogs. But yeah, it's really, really hard. And especially when you love your job so much, because I do. I think I have the best job at Savage. Sorry, everyone. Lies. Because I get to interact with our audience every single day. And the Procreate community is like 99.9% just full of stupidly helpful and encouraging and happy people. So it's a real joy to be a part of every day. So I do find it really hard to make that work-life balance, and it's something that I have to actively work towards every day. Yeah.
Awesome. And Paulien, you have sort of the reverse experience being being a freelance artist. How do you find that you manage your daily schedule, and is every day different, or do you put in things that are very specific and standardized in your routines?
I was thinking beforehand about what could I contribute to this topic. Because, to be honest, I am not a friend of routines. That's not how I work. I cannot have each day the same. And this is the recipe how I would lose my motivation or inspiration. And I'm also someone who dives deep into extreme phases of, I don't know, like before the event season this year started with Lightbox Expo in Los Angeles, I was just locked into my studio for months, painting, nothing else. Then I got cabin fever, and then I'm really happy to be out at the events and do nothing else, say no to every job and just have a blast. and not think of work, but at the same time get inspired to be able to get to personal work again. So everything is more like a matter of cycles, and I do everything with all my heart. But that also means when I'm working day to day, when I'm actually actively sitting with a problem that has to be solved, I will solve it, no matter if the night will be over by then or not. And I feel like for my mental health, this is very healthy. I feel like I'm dealing well with everything that is coming up in private and in business life because I love what I do. But I do think also that part of being an adult probably is sometimes to get some discipline in certain things, also regarding health, like physical health, and I want to work on that, but...
But there are sketches to be done. God damn it.
Yeah, and thank God this panel is without all this alcohol like last time. And so it's hard to say no to that during the event. Yeah, so I think I'm just a work in progress like everyone, but I do embrace not to have the same schedule each day. That's how I stay sane.
I just got one. I hear Max saying like he's treating it like he's an athlete and like going, must be nice. No, that's not how it works, man.
What's it like for you?
Especially not during Inktober. It's stupid. Like I'm doing it with my wife these days, and it's fucking like we hear people like who prepared for it, who like have sketches ready and stuff. And that sounds like a great idea. I should have done that, but I didn't. So now I'm days behind, and it turns into like 18-hour days and stuff. It's I don't know.
Well, so then how do you structure your days?
Badly. No, there's, it depends. Being a freelancer means that you're not entirely sure where the next meal ticket is going to come from. And in an effort to sort of try and balancing that out and try and sort of mediate some of that fluctuation, you go into other projects. So like I'm running a Patreon now and like doing that along with the Twitch stream and everything. So that's adding a little bit to the sort of standardization of the schedule, but it's still very flexible and
Flexible.
Seriously.
Flexible and chaotic.
In as much as if I'm not feeling that I can deal with sitting and drawing in front of like 100, 200 people, I don't have to do it. There's no one to force me to do it. It's a voluntary thing, so it's fine. But then there's an intuitive reason to try and sort of get past that like laziness reflex. Like I don't know if you know who Anthony Bourdain was.
Sure.
Yeah. So he had this wonderful quote where he said that there's a guy living in my head whose only wish is to lie in my bed, smoke weed, and watch TV all day, and I found a bunch of tactics to fight that dude. And I identify with that. Like it's a bad idea to have too much weed in the house, but. So try and shame yourself a little bit if you're getting too comfortable.
So the order is less weed in the house.
Yeah. Among other things.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, make the pleasures immediate.
Well, so as a when you were trying to break in, it's a position now that you can say, hey, if I don't want to work today, I don't want to work. But when you were trying to break in, when you were trying to understand how the business worked and how you were going to fit into it, did you have order and structure there? Did you have discipline there, or was it just you picked up a pen whenever you gave a shit?
Well, so there's a big difference between discipline and order, let's say. Okay. I draw a shit ton, but not always. And if I need time off, I take time off. And the problem with like drawing by a schedule, I've found through like anecdotes. I don't have actual data on this, but everyone I know who got tendonitis from drawing are people who draw from like 4 to freaking 8 to 5 every day. Because I don't know, it strains your hand weirdly. But so I don't standardize time. I just make sure that if I have a deadline, I'm aware of it, and I make sure that my stuff is delivered on time.
That sounds fucking awesome.
I mean, time isn't that difficult.
One of my favorite parts of doing these panels is how everyone will have a different opinion. And you will see that constantly here, that some people, it's train like a professional athlete. Other people, it's pick up the pen whenever I want. Time isn't difficult. And some people say, hey, if I don't master my time, then I end up smoking weed all day. And I think that's so cool to get to find out what is it that works for you. What is the system? And Eric, would you agree with that, or how does it work for you?
I actually agree with both points of view. I always teach my students that wanting to become a concept artist is like becoming an Olympics sports professional, because you have to train every day. There is a difference though. In sports, once you stop, you kind of deteriorate in a sometimes not so pleasant manner. That doesn't happen in the arts. So if you want to achieve any kind of success in concept art, you really have to work hard, train hard like crazy for a couple of years until you've made it, and then keep like a constant pace, but try to keep your mental health in a positive state. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've been through terrible crunch phases where work was unbearable, and I've been through phases that were kind of like really pleasant. You really have to figure out a way to do your work in a way that it supports your mental health. It isn't that easy. What I always try to do is I did this active training of separating my brain hemispheres. So there's the left and the right hemisphere. I try to do my creative work with the right exclusively, and I just keep my left hemisphere busy. So what happens, I would watch an entire season of anything on TV and paint while I watch, and then the next morning I would remember the TV show, but I won't remember the painting. So I've had instances where I woke up in the morning and suddenly there was 13 paintings in my studio, and I didn't know how I did that. I couldn't remember.
Wait, sorry. You got to walk us through that. How did you jump into training your right and left hemisphere, and how were you shepherded into making that work?
Yeah, that's a process that happened automatically, and I often see that when I talk to students and their parents, are criticizing their kids. When you do art and you watch TV while you do art, your left hemisphere will concentrate on consuming any kind of medium, and the right hemisphere will concentrate on doing creative work. And it's kind of like we have two people in our heads. The left hemisphere is the big asshole, always telling the right hemisphere, "Oh, you don't know shit." So it's like two siblings that are constantly fighting. Try to separate the two. Like take one sibling, put it in front of the TV, and let the other do their work. It happens. It actually happens automatically at some point, and it will help you. It will help you do your work. Even in companies, when I started working at Crytek, I told them, well, I want to work in the meeting room because there's a big TV. I want to watch like James Bond while I sculpt. They let me do it because they didn't understand. I just explained, well, you see, this is just how I work. I'm twice as fast while I watch TV when I sculpt because my left hemisphere is just not interfering. And that's actually something that really keeps you sane, even when you're working for the greatest idiots, because it's just you just separate those two, and you can keep your creative spirit flowing.
Where do you put your eyes?
Now, here's a difficult thing, because I'm a traditional sculptor, I see with my hands. I don't have to look at the sculpt all the time, because I see what I sculpt with my fingers. So I can watch TV and sculpt like that, and be constantly doing something, oh, that's too far, that's a little, that works. When I do paintings, I actually look a lot at the piece, but I constantly look at the screen as well. So it's more like jumping back and forth like a ping pong game. It does work. It's also good to watch things that you've already seen before, because then your attention is divided, but not exclusively pinned to whatever it is you're watching. Figure out a TV show you really love, you can watch over and over again, or films or whatever, and just keep that running and constantly separate those two halves. And that's worked for me so far.
This guy designed aliens.
No.
You mean parts of it. Well, how many of you guys watch stuff or listen to music while you're working?
I do, but it never works.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like amazed that Eric can do that, because when I sit on the couch and draw, I don't draw. I just end up watching Netflix, and I'll get through a whole series of my television show, whatever I'm watching, then I look down and I'm like, oh, drawn a smiley face. That's good. Well done. So I'm amazed that you can actually do that. I'm sure it does, yeah. But, I mean, I've been doing it for years.
Yeah, so I started sculpting when I was 5, and I was constantly listening to radio plays when I was a kid, constantly. So I would always have this audio distraction, and I would sculpt on the side. So I actually started really, really early, and a lot of kids do that. My children do that automatically, and I try to encourage them to constantly do that, because it does kind of build up this ability to actually separate those two hemispheres and then work creatively. Like my one daughter I was two daughters. The little one is really creative. She does a lot of stuff like that. She would listen to a radio play and sculpt or paint or do stuff like that. The other one's more interested in horses. So it doesn't really work there, but.
Awesome. Well, Trevor, yeah, where do you file on the path here? Do you
Pure, absolute, mismanaged chaos. I think I'm here more as a cautionary tale, to be completely honest.
Please proceed.
So any of you who have followed anything I've ever posted on Facebook in the last 3 years know I've been struggling with a particularly aggressive RSI, we'll say. It's yet to be diagnosed by like more than a dozen doctors. I took a year off. You don't know about this? Repetitive stress injury, right? We know this? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Walk us through it.
It's undiagnosed. I had tendonitis, which was covering this other underlying problem, which happens to be symmetrical in both of my thumbs and the base of my hand. Makes holding a pen near impossible, and when it flares up, I have good days and bad days right now, but when it flares up, I lose a little bit of control. Like, my hands don't do exactly what I want them to. And this is directly because I don't know how to manage my time. To this day, I'm a 42-year-old man who has no idea how to manage a schedule whatsoever. I've got Post-it notes everywhere, to-do lists that have like random things. They're priority stacked, right? Like crossed off in the wrong order, like things that have to be done second have always come first. It's stupid. I'm an idiot. I literally spent a year not able to draw at all. Like, at all. It was excruciating.
What did you do in that year?
I did a lot of walking, reading, and listening to audiobooks. There's only so much TV and Netflix you can watch. I can't play video games. I have a massive, let's say, Handschmerzen. Yeah? Yeah, woo! Volkshochschule. It was really difficult. I tried to spend as much time with my kids as possible because, I was on disability leave in the States, and so I spent a lot of time at home. I was able to hang out with my children more, which is fantastic and also excruciating. Your physical health, like your work just can't come at the expense of your physical health, and I've unfortunately learned this a really hard way, but I hope you guys don't have to, I would spend 8 to 12 hours every day at the studio, usually closer to 8. I was really good about leaving on time. But then once the kids go to sleep, I'm drawing till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So the kids go to bed at 8, and I've got another 6 to 8 hour day ahead of me just drawing for myself. Because I never wanted my work to become an excuse for not doing my own things. But unfortunately, this is unsustainable, right? Like there has to be, one of these sides has to give, either your work or your personal stuff. And just in the last year, I chose that work has to give. And so I've left the industry. I will occasionally do freelance when I really need money. But the time I have that I can actually use my hands and create things, I want to use for my own things and not for someone else.
That's an amazing position to be in and to have earned. And I think, how do you balance that with your kids? Then?
I guess it's fairly easy at this point because I'm not going to an office every day. I go into the school with my kids every morning. I ride my bike to pick them up in the afternoon. I spend the afternoons with them. And they'll generally around dinner time just leave me alone in my office to work if that's what I want to do. But even if I start work after they go to bed on my own personal things or the 1 or 2 freelance jobs I'll do a month, I've spent the day with them. It's awesome and, like I said, excruciating. But it's really not difficult to manage when one of those responsibilities pretty much disappears.
Right. And am I correct? It's Eric and Trevor, the only 2 panelists with kids, right? I think this is something that we haven't gotten to talk much about on these panels that I think is really important. Actually, Paulien came and brought it up to me after. Where do you find, if you are, especially earlier in y'all's career when you were working in the studio, how do you manage showing up for your kids on those tough, long days?
Personally, I just made sure that weekends were family time.
Cool.
Again, it's weird. Like your nerves are very raw to certain things your kids do when you don't spend the entire week around them. Like my wife was doing at the time. My wife was doing a bit of freelance, but she was with the kids all the time while I was at the studio. And so that becomes a nice, delicate balancing act in itself, right? Like getting used to this behavior that you're not overexposed to. My wife's just beaten down. I was like, why aren't you doing this? It's just like, just let it happen, It's just a constantly evolving and ongoing process because kids never stay the same every year. Every 6 months, they're kind of a different person. You know, that's part of growing up.
Right. Yeah. Do you find the same, Eric, or how did you manage that?
That's a bit of a difficult one. I always had to work a lot, so I always tried to carve out time for the kids. But I also found, I do have the professional work, which is much more left brain stuff, because I run a design school. And I try to do my personal work to sustain my mental health in a way, because I have to do it. So as for a lot of artists out there, if you have the urge to do your work because you have to, you just have to. It's like breathing. It's a natural thing. But I found that when my kids realize that I do something that I really have to do, I do with my heart, and that's really important to me, they just let me do it. So it was never a problem for them when I said, I have to paint now.
And do you sit down and have conversations with them like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would always have them around. Like, I can't have anybody else around when I'm painting, but my kids, they're always there. They can't always be there. Sometimes they're bored. This is boring. They want to do something else. Let's play Minecraft. But they're always witness to me working, and I try to explain a lot. If it's designing anything, I always try to get them to understand what it is I'm doing. So I kind of found collaborators in a way, like positive sidekicks. Even if they don't like it, it's still something where they participate in some sort of a way, and they get to see me that way. Because when I'm actually doing creative work, I'm like a headless chicken. I'm all over the place. I'm super confused and super flaky, and so that's the other thing where I agree. The creative process is something very, very chaotic. Mm-hmm. Like, my assistant would probably tell you a lot of stories. She's sitting over there. Like, I can't even find my coffee mug. So I would have about 5 coffee mugs all over the place, all full of coffee, because I can't find them. And my kids are making fun of that sometimes. And that's a nice thing. So they're participating in it, and I can just live it.
How awesome. I always loved the day of like go to work with Dad and get to spend some time in the office. I think it's so cool that you get to have that so frequently. I think it's a refrigerator. And I think I love this term too, positive sidekicks. I think that's super cool. Georgie, you had mentioned your partner and the tough parts about balancing both things. How do you work on communicating efficiently about when it is that you need to work, and do you set clear boundaries, or is that something that you focus on?
The boundaries thing's not so much. I don't really have any boundaries when it comes to my work. But if there is, like, obviously during a release time, we're all really, really busy at Procreate. There's a lot to do. Just before, leading up to, and just after, especially for me, because I get then slammed with all of our users who are super excited, and maybe the update hasn't appeared in their country yet, and they're wondering why, and like all of this, it's just constant. And in that situation, when I get home, I will just say, look, it's release time. I have a lot of work that I still need to do. And he says, yeah, sure, that's fine, and we'll just put Netflix on in the background, and that's like the one time that Netflix doesn't distract me in my work. Yeah. Art, no. Work, yes.
Release time, yeah.
Yeah, so, and he'll watch that, and it'll be on in the background for me, and I'll work as much as I need to. But there are times that he gets a little bit shitty with me for working so much, especially if I'm like running late for work one morning, and he will just it happens really suddenly. I'll just be like, oh, I'm running late, and he'll just go, you work all the time. You work late, you work weekends, you can be 15 minutes late to work, it's fine, they're not gonna fire you. And I can tell then that he's gotten a little bit pissed off about how much I'm putting into my work. And it's those moments, it's usually, as I said, around release, when I have just been working constantly, and then I need to get to the office because I've got more work to do, that I have to go, oh, shit, yeah, okay, I need to really take a step back here and go, all right, well, how about this weekend we go out to breakfast, to lunch, we go and do something, we go to the beach, we go do a walk or something like that. And just really focus on creating that time that I'm not looking at my phone, and I'm actually having a conversation with him.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Evan, do you find in your personal life and with your relationships that it's important for you to be methodical? And if time is super easy, do you ever run into personal issues? It sounds like work has been pretty seamless for you, but do you find that in your relationships you have to focus on it a little bit more?
I have kind of two work modes. One is like concepting, and the other one is like render monkey. And so render monkey mode, I can Netflix, I can put on something, I can kind of get lost in the myriad options of whatever. And then like if it's concepting, I need like both brain halves. I can't really do the whole like put on James Bond and get lost. I actually have to concentrate, which is painful. And so I need like silence or rainymoods.com. It's perfect. And you can and there's another one called Noisely, which it's even better because you can put your own soundscape in. You can add some thunder, a little bit of a babbling brook.
Beautiful, yeah.
It's great.
Babbling brook.
Oh,
come on, tell me more.
It gets a little bit romantic. But the point being that that's if Sunny then should come in and ask me like some cute question about like a message she's got from her sister about something, I'll be like no. And then otherwise, I'll try not to be too unpleasant. But
clear reenactment.
Yeah, well, that's the inside. But the actual reaction is, which is I agree that's not particularly pleasant, but I can't help that because it's But what was the actual question? Because I do realize that I'm not actually answering it.
No, I mean you're on it. We're getting claps. Do you find that you have to, when Gollum is screaming inside of you, or perhaps when after that time has passed, do you get specific in your communication about how and when you're going to be in that zone, and does that require you sort of giving some personal maintenance outside of your work?
I probably should. I try to make up for it by being nice and sort of like getting that extra cup of coffee, or being nice and sort of going back and asking and answering questions and sort of making myself available. But it's also like with general social engagements. Like I have very understanding friends who are very good at like knowing that I tend to kind of hermitize if I'm in work mode, and so they'll be like trying to coax me out, like, oh, you want to go climbing? You want to go you want to go skiing? And
See if they can get you.
Yeah, and then I'm like, I got work to do, and they're like, but don't you kind of want to? I'm like, okay. Fine. And then about 5 minutes into it, I'm like, why don't we do this more often? I don't know. I don't understand. So I find I have a very good support system.
Is the message to go in those cases for
the
audience?
message is to like, do not listen to this guy. Like, get yourself out. If people are trying to get you out of your situation, they're probably looking at you and going, they probably need to get out of that situation. So, listen, if you are lucky enough to have like a proactive support system, listen to them because they're nice people. Like Spirit is a very good example. He usually knows when I need a kick in the butt for like things that I'm bored of doing. Like we share a Dropbox, for example, where I'm very bad at getting things up on the Dropbox when they need to be there. And so he'll gently sort of drop me a little note of like, did you remember to upload this and this and this? I'll be like, no, I'll do it tonight though, I promise. And then he'll be like, did you remember to do it? And I'm like, okay, I'm doing it right now. And so, having those little passive pressures is useful, at least for me. I don't know how that works for everybody else. But for me, it's useful because I'm not, if it's just up to me, and if I'm working on something, I'm probably working on it because I want to do it. Mm-hmm. But if it's something I'm doing with someone else, then I'm very good at like finding reasons to put it off. And so it's very good to have people who are willing to sort of look through the annoyance of me being like, dodgy. And
Needs a spirit up?
Exactly.
Everyone needs a spirit.
That's my tip for anybody doing freelancing. Get yourself a Jen Agus.
Well, and I think that this is really delicate advice because I think who we become is often a direct result of the expectations of our peer group. And, there's the old adage, show me your 5 closest friends and I'll tell you exactly who you are. And I think that it's really important, to have a really good network, to get yourself a spirited done. And what that means is get yourself friends who care about you and that know about you and have your best interests at heart. But do you find, and actually, Paulien, do you find that when you're along the way, do you find that you've encountered people whom, in your growth process, that you've had to say goodbye to? You've had to sort of shrink your sphere of influence so that you could focus on the things that were most important? Did you ever find that people were slowing down your process in ways that weren't healthy for you?
I think that's a very vulnerable topic because.
And you don't have to answer anything you don't want.
No, it's just like that happens. I think it does happen to everybody who is having a drive and a vision, and they want to get somewhere, because there are always people who are not like that, and it is always connected to goodbyes and pain, and sometimes. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I did find myself doing that. And it's not even about the typical people who are toxic, get rid of them, blah, blah. It's more like I felt that I had trouble to reconnect with them because I wanted so much more, and I work hard for being where I am. And some people are just happy with a little less, and that's fine. But I need input and exchange, and I want to be understood, and I want to be with people who have their own mind and thoughts and opinions. And now that at the moment I'm living with my parents again, because my life took a complete different turn than I expected, and I'm trying to reconnect with my hometown people, and it's super nice and nostalgic on some level, but I also feel like I need to change. I need to have my own life back, and I need to move somewhere where there are more like-minded people.
Where would that be?
Yeah, that's there's a lot of things. A lot of cities are an option at the moment. I'm completely confused.
You're still figuring it out?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do you find that setting boundaries as you go and look for where the next spot would be, what do you imagine are the things that are missing in your life now to where you want them to be?
What do you mean?
Well, as you're going to look for getting around more like-minded people or getting into a new environment, what are some of those things that you feel like you don't have now that you would hope to find in a new environment?
People that have similar goals, and people who I can actually look up to and learn from. And I think I discovered a lot of those places this year through the art events. For example, when I went to LA, I never thought that I would have the urge to move to the US, because why would you? But
Very good point.
Especially now.
Especially now. But I found this bubble of people that are just so inspiring, and the little time that I spent there with them was setting my inner worlds on fire, that I feel like, okay, for like a limited amount of time, I could imagine to be there. I think I just go with how you feel in the moment, if it feels aligned, if it feels like meant to be, some sorts of.
That's a very good answer. Or you can go out and find those people and then bring them home with you. That's much better. I did that with my wife. That's much better.
Well, Max, you live in LA, and
For now.
yeah, for now, and you've been there for a while. I think keeping with this idea of positive sidekicks that Eric brought up, I think is such a cool idea, or such a cool term. You have been such.
Are you calling me your sidekick?
If I'm understanding the word sidekick, I think so, because you have been such a positive sidekick for me, and I hope I've been that for you too. You know, one of the things that we talked about a little bit this morning was how different you and I are, and being partners, finding in our work that we can be complementary opposites, and we can watch areas of the job that the other one's not. I want to talk about just your work habits, you know, because I know you have, it sounds like some differing, you know, you have on the scale of discipline on this panel, it seems to be you're heavily on the discipline side. And can you talk a little bit about your daily routine and when you start working and when you stop working, and how that comes into play for you?
Yeah, I feel like I always, on these panels, embody like the far end of the spectrum. I think it's because we're surrounded by a bunch of artists, and I treat art like a very different thing here.
Explain that first.
art is not joyful for me. I do not enjoy doing artwork. It is a very painful process for me.
He's serious.
I'm completely serious. I go to battle with art every day, and I've been doing it for the better part of my life. And
Have you tried knitting?
do you know how much I'd fight with the yarn?
Are you sure you're not a cat?
And so because of that, because art is a battle for me, I need to find discipline and I need to find a way around it in order to consistently produce. And at my peak in my career, I was creating around 250 paintings a year. I've done a couple thousand paintings for a couple hundred movies and shows at this point, and it was always how can I make sure I can consistently and repeatedly hit a very, very high standard and be able to do that in the fastest amount of time to be able to execute as many projects as possible in order to have the biggest impact on entertainment I can. Now, after many years of burning out horribly to the point where the sight of a Wacom Cintiq would make me sick to my stomach, I realized that the only way for me to actually have a sustainable career and one that is no longer in matte painting because of how many times I've burned out is to be able to create a routine, something that's repeatable that I can do for a very, very long time without getting to that dark place anymore. And so for me, I wake up 7 a.m. every day. I do my morning routine. I have my coffee, I read, I journal, I meditate, exercise, hit the emails, do all my creative work. I'm in the office at noon because I need all of that time in the morning for myself to get things in order. Banks and I have learned over the years that I'm a morning person, he's a night person. We have a small window where both of us are conscious. The overlap is 1 to 4, 5 o'clock starts pushing it. By 7 o'clock, I'm out of the office and my brain is done for the day. And so knowing now that I need to leave before the sun goes down in order to want to go back the next day and to make sure that I never burn out ever again. I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, and you put into place for us, for our whole team, one thing that I think is really cool, where we don't have mandatory hours that you have to be working. We have specific goals and deadlines for each department to hit, but our rules are you can't be working at certain hours. So no one is supposed to work after 7 p.m. or on the weekends. And I found that to be a really interesting way for us to look at this and how do we manage burnout. And you brought up burnout a couple times, and I know you've had some pretty specific experiences. When you describe your client work and your career there, it sounds pretty intense, but could you talk us through a little bit of those burnout experiences that led you to this opinion?
Yeah, I spent years doing 3 projects at a time. So I'd do 10 hours at the studio, I'd come home, and I'd have another 6 to 8 hours of client work, and I would do that for months on end. Very, very stupid thing to do. But you hit this point in your career where you start getting calls for projects that, when Halo calls, what do you say? Nah, I'm busy. Fuck no. Yeah, exactly. So you start to get these calls for projects and it starts to get super exciting, and so you just want to take them all. Why wouldn't you want to have your stamp on every type of franchise possible? After a certain point, those franchises don't mean anything if your life balance isn't in order. I look at a lot of the projects that I've accomplished, and I don't look back at them with great memories. I look back at them at the sacrifices I had to make in order to do them. And so hopefully I can be the cautionary tale for this as well. Luckily I have my health and I'm able to create anymore, but at the same time, I didn't do a painting last year. I couldn't paint. It was too painful for me. And I think that I was in a race, and there is no race to be had. If you want longevity in your career, if you want to have that 20, 30, 40, 50-year career, then you need to pace yourself, and you need to find balance, and you need to find ways to mitigate this, to take weekends, to spend the time with the people in your life that matter to you, and invest in those relationships, because a project's going to end. And then when the project ends, what do you have?
And there's a physical addendum to that, which is the human brain can only sustain active action for 6 hours anyway. So I've been in that situation of when I first got to Quebec to work for Volta, I would be at the studio for 8 hours a day, and then I'll go home at 5, be asleep by 6, I'd be up by 1 a.m., and then I would work from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then go back to work. And like, I was not effective at work at all. I was there and I was like doing the work and I was high as shit on caffeine. Like, woo! but at the end, I didn't do good work. I did the work and you know, I got to stay in the job and it was fine. But you know, after 6 months of doing that, I was just, I couldn't do that anymore. And you know, I got a lot of stuff done. But then at the end of it, you know, it's not my best work and it's not the stuff that I learned a lot from, even though I did like a ton of studies at the time. But it's just like you don't manage to commit stuff to memory. You don't manage to like create new pathways. You don't manage to create new routines. So yeah, I mean, you make an excellent point. I want to say, like, I'm a big fan of that approach.
Well, there's an equation that I love that we talk about a lot, and that is that growth equals stress plus rest. And you can't get to growth without both of them. And I think stress can be a really confusing thing if you love what you do. And for I'm sure all of us, we all experience this, where you can get so stressed out while doing the thing that you're super passionate about and not realize that is tearing you apart because you're so in it that you forgot to drink and you realize it's gone, 12 hours and you haven't eaten because you're just so in it. And I think for many high achievers, the thing becomes, can you remember to put in the rest? And can you get specific about the rest? And one of the things that we've done to mitigate this is we put happy and healthy on our whiteboard. And we found that if we don't treat it like another project, we won't do the things that give us the proper rest to make us sustain. There's keep quoting you, Max. That Max has been saying this for a long time, that the goal is not to win. There is no finish line for this. The goal, rather, is to get to continue playing. And I think that is such an important distinction if you want to find a way to sustain. Eric, how do you, especially early on in your career, when you were getting going and didn't have the stability that you have in place now, how did you manage stress? Did you manage stress? Was it something that you thought about?
I really dove into every kind of project that came up. So I had pretty much the same issue. Whoever called, whatever project came up, I would do anything and everything. I wouldn't go to sleep, I wouldn't eat, I would just work. So at some point I was not burnt out in the medical sense, but in the mental sense. Like, there's things I wouldn't do on a client basis anymore. I will never paint again for a client. I will do portraits and stuff like that, but I will never put myself under a stupid art director who doesn't know anything about painting and having them tell me what to do when I paint. So there's things that I actually quit. So I quit doing professional painting. I would sculpt all the time, do stuff like that, do design, all of these things. And I've seen this happen to a lot of people who are just mentally burnt out on a certain topic. Maybe that comes back at some point, but it's actually something I learned when I worked for Giger, who couldn't paint anymore. When we worked on Star Trek, he couldn't paint. That time was over. He was completely out of this monumental epoch of work that he did. And it was because he just couldn't do it anymore. So there's some similarities there. So I totally second what he said. It's also for all the artists here, super important. Most of you will go through that phase, but you can survive it. There are ways there's a life after that. There's a life after crunch time. The problem is that many leaders in the industry, they don't care. They'll let you burn out because there's so many other artists out there who are just waiting in line to work for big companies, big projects, who are just, who want to be on those projects. And there's places that I've been through games projects with 13 months of crunch time, where people afterwards had 50 days of extra vacation time because that's the overtime they put in 1 year. I mean, 50 days, that's like 10 work weeks. So, and you will always encounter these leaders and try to avoid that, or suffer through it for a few years and then take a break because there's no way to...
Well, on that point, do you disagree? I feel like there's a constant idea of when you're getting going, say yes. And I think like you described, when you were jumping into the business, you would take anything.
Yes.
You would take all of it and you would do all the work. Do you think that while you're young, there is value, while you're trying to establish yourself, while you're trying desperately in such a competitive space, where, you know, a lot of people don't have a very long timeline that they can make it.
Yeah.
And if they don't make it in that timeline, they got to stop. And then they got to go get a desk job somewhere. So do you disagree with the idea that it's valuable at the front end to burn the candle as hard as you can?
To be honest, I don't disagree, because I did it because I wanted it, and nobody forced me to do that. I did it because I wanted it. And a lot of the kids I saw, and especially in the games industry, they wanted to work these hard hours. They wanted to burn the midnight oil. The question is, what happens afterwards? Is there a safety net for these people? Is there a safety net, like a great team, great friends, great people around you that can actually help you carry the weight that comes after that? And if that's not in place, a lot of people just drop into a depression or burn even further out on a private level. So that's a very difficult thing to balance, because you never know what's going to happen. So when people are young and throw themselves at the work, I totally understand it. I did the same thing. I worked crazy hours. I had a really weird kind of time schedule. Like, I would work at night because nobody would call me up at night. So actually, I based my life around like non-disturb hours, just to be able to put even more work into what I wanted to do. And I don't regret it, but really look after yourself. Try to see that you have a safety net. You have good friends, maybe other artists who just kind of, you know, can give you support once the dip comes. Once, you know, you have this after project down and low, you need somebody to really support you. And that's even more important sometimes, because you all just want to do the work. You're all going to be excited to work for, you know, any kind of big publisher or production company or any kind of project. But keep in mind that at some point you won't be able to do that anymore.
I think that's such good advice to think about. You know, this is one of the most competitive industries in the world. And the reason is because it's awesome. You know, you guys have the coolest job you could possibly want. And to dive into that, what that means is that there's going to be a lot of competition, and that the supply of people who can do the job is so high, and what people are willing to do it is so high, which puts everyone in a pretty precarious situation as we start to think about these things like burnout. Trevor, what's some advice you have for recognizing burnout early? You know, there's so much talk of like early diagnosis, trying to catch it before it happens.
This is all hindsight being 2020, because I have not been good at this. I think be honest with yourself about what type of person you are. And I know that sounds weird. I know it's like everybody wants to go in there and do an awesome job and impress their art director, producer, project lead, whatever. Some of us aren't fucking cut out for it. I am not cut out for it. I am not cut out for a large studio environment and endless iterations based on this person's feedback from the janitorial department, and then this guy over here who runs the front desk, but he's got a really good eye for this art because he took an art history class in college while he was majoring in office supplies. We're not all cut out for it. I should have known this. I dropped out of high school. I actually spent the last 2 years of high school either hiding out in the art room or drinking in the parking lot. It's still sort of at school, but really just ignoring it. I've dropped out of college twice. How did I get to college without a high school degree? I have no fucking idea, but they let me in. But I've done this. I've tried my personal best, and my personal best is I cannot give a fuck about this structure. I cannot give a fuck about these classes. This is a lack of discipline. This is me just being, to this day, an angry fucking teenager who just wants to say, no, you're fucking wrong to everything, right? Like, this is a really tough impulse to control. But when they say maybe I'm not cut out for it, maybe I'm not cut out for it. And it's taken me 15 years to realize this. This is why I left America. This is why I left Los Angeles, left my last job. I am so much happier now. I just want to do stuff for me. What made me happy as a kid wasn't the next Star Wars movie or RoboCop. Okay, so RoboCop 3 really made me happy. It was a stupid movie. And yes, Return of the Jedi, while disappointing, it was fun to see teddy bears kick robots' ass. But my favorite creators have always been these people that went it alone. They weren't working on a franchise and doing cool artwork for Halo or awesome artwork for Destiny. Those guys are still fucking badass, and they're making amazing stuff. But if it's an artist who's working on a thing that I respect, I generally respect their personal work quite a bit more. Growing up for me was Katsuhiro Otomo for Akira. That blew my mind. I saw it when I was maybe 13 years old. Back in the 80s, I saw it at a comic convention in Boston, and I immediately bought with all of my paper route money, because you could have a paper route where I grew up. It was a very small town. I immediately spent every bit of money I had on me, on every issue I could get from this guy. It wasn't the whole collection, but it was most of it. And then I just got on the bus and left. There was literally nothing else to see that day. And I made it a habit to go back and keep doing these things. But it was always from these people that were doing this massive, impressive thing on their own. It also warped my fucking brain. Like, I have no joy left. I don't appreciate joyful things anymore. I like serious, horrible things and then very stupid things, but that's it. It's hard to have kids when you're just like, yeah, fucking Akira, Ghost in the Shell, these are awesome things, right? And they're all like, hey, Dad, look at this Hotel Transylvania. I'm sure it's a fantastic movie. I cannot appreciate it. I was like, I'm just going to go in this other room and pretend you're not watching this because it hurts my heart that you're enjoying this right now. What were we talking about? I know, but I'm being very mean, and it is for comedic effect. And
I just want to thank you for listing all my credits.
I am so very sorry.
I just love that in the rebellion against order, you left America for Germany.
I know. What a joke that is.
That is a perfect place for us to stop. We are sadly out of time. We could keep doing this for hours. Thank you all tremendously. I think the important part that Trevor wound this up for us on is that everyone is different, and that you're going to find what works for you. And what works for you may not be the same thing as what works for the person who just gave you advice. So take advice very, very carefully. And find who you want to be within this whole crazy wild business, because it is a very, very fun adventure. It can lead you to dark places with our gentlemen on my left and right. So take your personal health very seriously. Take care of yourself and take care of the others on your team, because at the end of the day, that will be the thing that you take with you. One recommendation for you all, if this is a topic that's interesting for you, finding out who you are, Mike Hill is going to be giving a talk at 11 o'clock tomorrow on the Enneagram, which is a thing that David Fincher's obsessed with on how do you find your personality type. We've been very fortunate to hear him talk on this a lot, and it is absolutely fascinating. So 11 o'clock on the main stage tomorrow. One thing that we really like to do here to conclude things, being that this is the end of day one, is we like to do one collective clap. So if you all would join us on the count of 3, we'll all do one clap, and then we can go on our merry way and have an amazing night.